Hey everybody, we're back to coming back to you again. Second season. This will be episode number 7 in total. This week we're talking about the Travis Walton encounter. I'm Robert Johnson, and with me, as always,
I'm Darin Laners.
who's got a lovely shade of blue hue and some great Pulp Fiction posters. And I'm glad I'm not the only person with a map of the world on my wall. Do you also have little pins in yours? I have pins in mine.
I've not put the pins in yet to the places I've been, but
I tried to, and then I actually put pins in places that I want to go. It's like color coded because I'm weird like that. But
is there
we
a
should,
legend with the pins on your map?
uh-huh. Yeah.
Nice.
We should just appropriate your map and put like UFO sightings.
It's funny you mentioned that. So, one of my lodge members, late father, he was also a member of my lodge, was a MUFON investigator for the area. So I'm trying to get my hands on his dad's MUFON files. So if I do, we'll have to have an episode about those.
That'd be awesome. Well, I think one of the first things, so people watching at home, the last episode we talked about another famous encounter, probably one of the more, I don't know, maybe the one that really started it off in terms of modern abduction stories is Betty and Barney Hill. If you guys missed that, the YouTube video's out. Episode number 6, Betty and Barney Hill. And Darin and I were talking a little bit about some other encounters, and what we're talking about in these episodes really is a deep dive into what's going on, what was perceived to have happened, what were the accounts of the people, what's the credibleness of all of it. And we really talked about Betty and Barney Hill. So if you missed that episode, go back and watch it. Do Darin and I think Betty and Barney Hill is a legit story? Well, we agreed with Lisa, who was also on the program at the tail end, and she was correct in my opinion on whether or not it's real or not. So go back and watch that episode. But I want to ask Darin before we really dive in, as far as the Travis Walton case, like where would you put it on a scale of 1 to 10 of the known UFO incidents?
Uh, Probably number two. I would put, Betty and Barney Hill above it. I mean, it's in the top five at least. I think the Ariel School sighting is because it's such a mass sighting, maybe is above or above the Travis Walton incident. Phoenix Lights, maybe, but I mean, are we talking just UFO incidents? Or are we talking incidents with alien encounters? Because there's kind of a difference there.
That's true. That's true. I have to agree. I think it's an amazing story. So the first time I ever learned about the Travis Walton case was just a small blurb on a show that some of our viewers might remember, which was called Sightings. It was one of those great shows that came out in the gold in I would say the platinum age of television for me, which was like Sightings and when animals murder you.
Animals Attack.
And X Files and all the cool shows were on the telly.
Fox, yeah.
And so I saw this little blurb about this guy named Travis Walton. And of course, this is being reported, on a television show in the 1990s. And I don't know if the movie was like made by HBO, or if it just premiered on HBO. I don't. Maybe it was in the theater. I just remember I taped it off of HBO, and the
What?
movie was Fire in the Sky.
Yeah, it was a theatrical release.
Was a really big eye opener on this account. Now, of course, it says inspired by or based on true events, and you can never really take it for everything because a lot of times those things are dramatized to include more or less facts to tell a story. I would like to go over to you, Darin. Maybe you can give some context on maybe that the most, not the Fire in the Sky story, but let's get a rundown of what happened with Travis Walton and why this was such a amazing thing to happen in the field of, abduction and UFOs.
So the event occurred on November 5th, 1975 in or near Heber, Arizona. It actually occurred in the Apache Sitgraves National Forest. There was a crew of loggers, of which Travis was one of the members of the crew. They were behind on a contract. They're working late or into the night to catch up on the contract. So there are 7 of them in the truck. They're on their way home from work. They encounter a UFO. Travis Walton, for some reason, jumps out of the truck and starts running towards the UFO. He's struck by a blue beam, and the crew chief of the crew, the logging crew, his name's Mike Rogers. He starts the truck and drives away in a panic. They think Travis is dead. Nobody knows what happened to him. They basically calm down. They go back to find Travis, and he's gone. Travis is missing for a total of 5 days. The authorities believe that the crew has murdered Travis. They're given lie detector tests. All of them pass. Let me take that back. I think one of the lie detector tests was inconclusive. I think what was his name?
It was troublesome because the guy that came away and was inconclusive was the guy that they thought was the probable murderer.
Yeah, correct. So 5 days pass. Travis reemerges, claiming that he's spent the last 5 days aboard a UFO, although he only has 2 hours of memories of the incident. And he's shocked to discover he's been missing for 5 days. He's got 5 days worth of growth on his beard. And from there, that basically starts the this was a big media circus because it was, a pretty well documented case, and a lot of people didn't believe the logging crew. There have been subsequent lie detector tests given to all of them. I think the most recent of which was given to Travis on a Fox, or it was a show. I forget the name of the show, but
I thought it was like on Geraldo, and he failed it.
No, it was something like that. But yeah, he did fail that last lie detector test.
While you look that up, it was really just such a bizarre case when we think about. You said nobody believed the logging crew, and let's be honest, in the 1970s, there was a lot of things that were going on around the country. We had some of the first 24-hour news coverage. You had people who were, the media sensation was, just nuts because you had covering in the news about serial killers and all of these things, that people were just consuming for the first time, this mass media consumption. And nobody's believing the loggers because they're loggers, and they just think, oh, these are unintelligent guys. They're just a logging crew. They probably had a disagreement. Somebody killed somebody, and they all stuck together as a team. And, maybe, in some alternate universe, this had been true. And Bill Curtis is telling the story on True Crimes. But that's not what happened. And can you just imagine the shock and surprise that, when Travis Walton returns, which is a pretty spectacular return also.
Yeah. So the show was called The Moment of Truth, and it was a game show apparently that was on Fox for a little bit. And it was on July 31st, 2008. He was appeared on the show. The question was asked if he was abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975. Without hesitation, he said yes. And lie detection, whatever they were using to determine whether or not he was telling the truth, indicated that he was not telling the truth. So,
And this is crazy because he has passed and he's failed. And, lie detection is not admissible in a court of law. It's one of these things where we believe in it. There's some science. It's not admissible yet. Polygraphs are still issued to people who are employed by the police departments, by, dispatchers. And there's a lot of science that is put into these things and faith that they're correct in what they're, in what has been interpreted by these tests. And so one wonders, when it measures things like GSR, galvanic skin responses, back then versus today, does biology play a factor? Does years of remembering and altering your story, which naturally happens? We naturally embellish our memories over time. It's not something we can actually control. Every time you remember something small has changed. So over time, like, does his conscious mind not agree with, the body is an interpretation, of things? And does that give a false positive or a positive negative, with these polygraph tests? The movie Fire in the Sky was really sensational. They did make some big changes to the story. One of which was that they only used six loggers instead of 7, because apparently 7 people in a truck was just too much. They couldn't film it or something. But actually, I want to jump back real quick. You said that when he was returned, so he's returned and he has 5 days of growth on his face. When he was returned, the movie Fire in the Sky, the way they depict it is, he's got the whole, like, he's naked, shivering alone in a gas station bathroom, and he's like catatonic, can't talk, crying, just shivering. What do we know about the real return? Was that the case?
well, he was when he was found in the phone booth from which he made the call. I guess he called his brother, I believe, Dwayne, to come and pick him up. According to Dwayne, he was kind of in a similar state. I don't believe he was naked, however. I think he still had his clothes. But yeah, very much feeling that he had gone through something traumatic.
And obviously, one of the reasons why I think this case has come up again is the release of a documentary that was put out on Discovery Plus or Discovery, which I watched. I think I watched it twice. Darin, I know you watched it, I think. And it tells this story, and it tells it from the viewpoint, I think, of Travis and the media, and the kind of vindication that happened when it was proven that he had been telling the truth, and these logger guys who had some negative things to say in some prior interviews all of a sudden were again on. It seemed like for a while they didn't want to talk about this stuff anymore, but now all of a sudden they're willing to come on camera and talk and say, yeah, this happened. And in fact, the girl that Travis had married all those years ago, he's still with today, and she has like this emotional breakdown in the show, which to me is crazy, because what we're going to talk about later in the episode is kind of shocking. But in the movie Fire in the Sky, Travis Walton and Mike Rogers. Mike Rogers is the foreman of this logging crew. Travis Walton is dating Mike Rogers' sister, I think.
Correct. And that's who he ended up marrying. Dana is her name.
It is interesting because there's a lot of, I think, tensions that are happening that make you feel like maybe Mike Rogers doesn't like Travis Walton because he's dating his sister, or whatever else the case may be. But in the movie, they kind of make it like, yeah, Mike Rogers, the foreman, doesn't like Travis dating his sister, but Mike and Travis are like tight friends. They're good buddies. And of course, Mike Rogers is played by Agent Doggett from the X Files. Good old Robert Patrick. You don't have to like Agent Doggett from the X Files. I liked those episodes, and the movie itself was really captivating for me. I wanted to believe the way they portrayed it from some of the things that had happened in this experience were so unlike anything else that we had seen in the mainstream. I mean, you can read about UFO phenomenon and alien encounters in books, and find some pretty weird stuff that's going on. And I think Darin, you and I talked about this in a previous episode. I want to call it. I think it was Encounters, which was episode 5, the last episode of season 1, and we just went down the list of these different encounters and talked about these bizarre things, from getting abducted in the forest while you're hunting and landing on a planet made of crystals and like all of these wild tales. But the Walton case has a lot of this weirdness that is kind of atypical for UFO abduction stories, that we kind of never questioned whether or not it was atypical or not. Some of these things, I think you had some great points in the green room. I'm going to let you go over those, but I would just mention certain things like, number one, the idea that the Greys, it seemed as though in the movie, the idea that the Greys actually, what we interpret as them, are actually that's a suit that they wear, and under the suit, right, they have much smaller, beady little eyes, and they're kind of wrinkled, shriveled little people.
Yeah.
And you don't know because it wasn't really shown in the movie at all, but there were really 3 races of aliens that he dealt with. There were the Greys, there was something else that was like a larger gray, and then there was the Nordics, right, which has been made pretty popular in some other things. So the idea of an alien wearing a spacesuit, and that's what the Greys, are, with the big eyes and everything. That's a suit that they wear, apparently, like a biosuit. And that was new to this whole story. That was like kind of paradigm shifting.
Mhm.
The whole like encapsulation inside of like those, like, they look like just tubes where they put all the people. His escape attempt is really interesting. Just so much about this was atypical. Let's go over some of what you have on your list, Darin.
Well, let's first talk about kind of the differences between how the movie portrayed the incident and how he claims it occurred. So in the movie, as I recall, he was kind of in this kind of gelatinous cocoon, and then he's kind of brought out and experimented on. I don't believe that they show. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, so not 100%, but I don't recall them showing him like in his official account. He says that, well, he's changed the story. Originally, there were 2 aliens, then there were 3. He picked up this glass-looking tube from a nearby shelf or whatever, and was swinging it at the aliens. Ran out of the room. I ran into another room, found like a curved chair that had controls on the arms. Was trying to work with those to, I don't know, do what. I don't know what he thought he was going to do. Turns around, sees a human, but the human's wearing like a clear helmet. He's trying to communicate with the human. Human's not saying anything back. Human kind of guides him. He guides him out of the ship into what appears to be a much larger ship. And he's brought into another room where there are more humans. And then essentially, I think he ends up blacking out, and that's all he can remember. The movie, as I said, there's the gelatinous cube, a kind of cocoon that he's kind of stored in. He's brought out of that. He's experimented on. He discovers those suits, and he's essentially just dropped off, I think, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the encounter. I know that they kind of glossed over him encountering humanoid in the encounter. a lot of some of the atypical things that happen with the case are, first of all, and my feeling is that normally in all the other abduction stories, when people are taken from their automobiles are disabled, completely disabled, either because of the craft, the proximity to the craft, or the technology that these creatures possess to disable the automobile. But in the Travis Walton case, this UFO is not more than supposedly 100 feet away from this truck, but yet the truck's able to start right up and run away after Travis hops out. And none of the people actually claim to have saw Travis either be abducted. Only a few claim they saw a light hit him. There was, I think, a lot of panic. I'm not doubting that they saw something, but I'm not 100% convinced that what they saw was, I think in their minds, was a UFO, but I'm not quite convinced that it was. Just because of the, that truck just being able to start right up just really, really bothers me. It's just so outside of the normal abduction scenario.
I think also one of the things that troubles me with the case is that there are not just small changes, Darren. There are large changes in the way this story is told, and depending on who's telling it, there is obviously, I've never seen a truly objective look at this case, which is, I think, what we're doing in this episode. What we know was reported to have happened, what the film says, the differences there, the atypicalness. And what I mean by that is the things that are not normal with this. What sets the norm? As you pointed out, Darin, there are, the car doesn't work. We've got interruption in electromagnetic fields. You have loss of time. You have usually communication
Right.
of a sort that happens, telepathically.
Usually the abduction victims are completely paralyzed, like they cannot move under their own power. So it's very difficult to believe that Travis did not suffer this paralysis and was able to get up from the table and grab a glass tube and run around this UFO and run into these other rooms and discover these things. It's just not atypical of the normal abduction situation. In a normal abduction situation, the abductors are in complete control of the situation, and normally you are just a passenger on that journey.
Right, which leads us to say, what are these beings, low level, inept, did they just mess up? Oops.
Right.
Hey, that human, he kind of got loose on the ship.
Right.
It's just hard to believe that this would have been the case, but everything else lined up, didn't it, Darin? Everything else seemed to be so perfect. They passed their detector tests. They kept their story mostly the same over all of these years. Documentaries have been made. They even went out there and looked at the growth on the tree stumps that are still out there. And apparently there are abnormalities in the rings during the year that this supposedly happened.
Yeah, and that's another point of order that we even have after the event. The youngest member of the crew, he is 17-year-old. His name was Steve Pierce, and he fought with Travis, telling Travis that where Travis claimed the event had occurred isn't exactly how he remembered it. And Travis said, well, essentially gaslit him and said, well, what do you know? You're 17 years old. Made him basically question his own, sanity about where the supposed incident took place. It's interesting because they never say in all of Travis's tales, or none of the witnesses can tell you exactly how long they were in the truck before they saw the craft. Now, and more recently, when they've gone on some UFO podcasts and that, some of them have admitted they think they were at least in the truck 10 to 15 minutes before this occurred. Whereas if you look at a map of where they were, the logging site, and then the supposed site of the UFO abduction, it's very close by the logging site. So it's less than probably a 5-minute drive from the logging site to where the so-called abduction took place. Even Travis himself is very wary of telling people exactly where the abduction took place for whatever reason. But yes, to your point, and on the Discovery Plus abduction, or on the Discovery Plus special about Travis's abduction, they did find this ring of trees that had greater growth inward, supposedly where this UFO was hovering when it abducted Travis,
or didn't.
Or didn't. Yeah. So
one of the things, and I'll do it in post if I have the ability to, but it all depends if I can find a good map. Really, what would be beneficial, I think, for most people to understand is a map of the area and to look at what's actually there. I want to believe, just like the poster says, just like we all want to believe in this amazing, sensational thing, because there has to be something that's just so incredible. I saw a meme the other day that was like a UFO landing and the alien got out, and the alien walks up to the dude, regular human, just standing there, and he's like, "Hey," and the human's like, "Hey," and the alien says, "I'm an alien. What do you think?" And he goes, "Oh, I think it's really cool. I mean, I just have a lot of stuff going on right now." Like, the government basically admitted to there's definitely unidentified things. We don't know what they are.
Right.
And most of America was like, yeah, okay, next. Right.
Right.
And
I was going to say what essentially should have been one of the most major news stories of not only, this current time, but almost of all time, is the admission that these things exist and are flying around in our airspace, and we don't know what they are. We have no ability to stop them from doing whatever they want to do. And they seem to be very interested in our nuclear capabilities. And these three things alone, from a national security standpoint, I think should be very frightening for not only, our government, but I think the American people in general. I mean, let's face it, I think if they had any intention of enslaving us, we would already be enslaved. Unless we are already enslaved and we just don't know it, which is another theory altogether. But
yeah. Well, so we want to believe in these amazing stories, though. And Fire in the Sky, the Travis Walton story, is so sensational. And again, the major skeptic out there who really attempted to tear apart this story always seemed to be, to me anyway, like he had an axe to grind with these people. He treated everybody like they were idiots. But I think that recently, in 2021, in all of these specials, you hear from everybody. But you know who you don't hear from? Who do you not hear from, Darin? Mike Rogers. Mike's just not on any of these documentaries.
Well, he was on briefly the Discovery Plus one, and he was on briefly the Travis, the one that came out in 2015, which was called Travis, which essentially is just rehashing of the 2021 documentaries, rehashing essentially of what they spoke about on that. But interestingly enough, in 2021, Mike Rogers essentially has publicly changed his his tune. And not only on, if you can go out to his Facebook page, if you don't believe me, and scroll back in his timeline, where he essentially says that he believes he saw a UFO. That's not in doubt. But he said, I did not see Travis get abducted. He essentially throws shade at Travis, calling him Big Liar T, and has essentially come out, and on record, there's a video, a voice recording of him saying that this was hoaxed by Travis, his brother, and Mike essentially were in on this UFO hoax. The thought always was that potentially there could have been a hoax because they were so behind on their logging contract. And this allowed Mike to get out of the contract without severe penalty. Not only that,
not only that, but a week or so before the event, they had all watched or had seen news and things about the Betty and Barney Hill case.
The movie that was made in the early 70s or mid 70s.
Yeah, which starred James Earl Jones as Barney Hill. We talked about this on the last episode. And also there is some mention that the wording was they offered $100,000 for a news story, a good UFO news story. So now you've got really a couple reasons to create a hoax. $100,000 down the line once you do this.
This was 1975, $100,000. So that's a lot of money back then. I can look up the inflation right now, but
yeah. While you look up this inflation, let's just talk real quick about $100,000, book deals, movies and television, and the hoopla. Not to mention the fact you're going to get a free out on this logging contract. And you do care about Mike Rogers because he's your foreman and he's potentially going to be your brother-in-law.
So adjusted for inflation, $100,000 in 1975 is essentially almost $500,000 or just above $500,000 in today's
that's pretty slick.
$537,191 to be exact.
That's a pretty penny. And I know for a fact that those mountain boys ain't making that much money back then. Right. That's a big payday. I think you could have survived out in the woods that long, but let's just pretend maybe he couldn't. What other reasons could this not have been a hoax? I really don't know. There's nothing out there but hearsay.
Yeah. What also kind of points to a potential hoax is that when his mother, who he's supposedly very close to, was told of him missing, she took it very calmly. She didn't have like a meltdown and didn't have a freak out. Didn't almost as if she knew that her boy was all right. So I don't know if she was in on it or if she had maybe one of her other sons, Dwayne, maybe whispering in her ear that this was going on. I don't know. But when the law enforcement informed her that Travis was missing, she did not seem to be very concerned about it.
One of the things that is interesting to me is in these recordings of Mike Rogers in 2021 is that just before, so he says, there was a chainsaw sitting on top of the log, and I started talking with Travis. We talked a little bit about how to hoax a UFO, and so then move the story along a little bit, and he starts to talk about how they made this thing up. And yet it's possible to make something up and yet be a part of it, but still be in the dark, which it seems that Mike Rogers was to a point, because he seems to still say, oh, I saw something. There was something in the sky.
Yeah.
So then he changes the subject to, he tells the guy interviewing him, you come back here, you buy me dinner at some Mexican restaurant, and we'll talk about it or whatever. But the thing that was interesting was that he admits to a hoax, yet he says he saw something.
Right.
This was really curious to me. And I think this is what, the truth is stranger than fiction. So now we've got Mike Rogers, who says, I didn't see him get abducted per se. I saw something in the sky. The truck starts right up. Travis Walton is gone for 5 days. When he comes back, he's got 5 days of growth. They checked his urine, and in 5 days, with no food or water, you would have begun to at least um,
Went
your
into
body your body
ketosis,
would
maybe.
your body would start to use its own fat reserves, right? And so you go into a state of ketosis. So everybody's on like keto diets. You guys know what happens. You're using your fat reserves now, and they found that his urine had no signs of ketosis. So that in and of itself says that he must have had some kind of nutrient and water during these 5 days. Did the aliens put him on something? Maybe. But now let's look at a couple of these other facts, things that still drive home this questionability of the entire incident. The time in the car, you said 15 minutes, 5 minutes. How far were they? Nobody can agree on exactly where this thing abducted them. And why that's important is what I was talking about earlier, is this overview, this map of the area. So Darin really dove into picking apart some of why this is such a problem. Let me pass it over to you to get a little rundown on this.
Yeah, so the crew had stated various times that it took up 15 minutes to arrive at the site where they encountered the UFO, not the 2 minutes that was, as I said earlier, required to cover the 300 yards from the work site to the official abduction site. The UFO is described sounds very much like the top of a fire lookout tower, which there was one present in the several present in the Apache Sitgraves National Park, but the one that was most likely used was called the Gentry Fire Lookout Tower, and
So
it's
let me paint this picture then, like a lighthouse in a forest that's used to signal for fires.
yeah. So imagine a a large high tower, kind of obscured by trees, lit up at night. So there's just this white light coming out from it. And then it is very much enclosed in glass. So you have these glass kind of frames about it, these window frames. Now, this is the description of the UFO, and these are recent descriptions, semi recent descriptions. So this is Steve Pierce, and he said the thing is beautiful, solid white. You could see the window frames coming down from it, and then there's a frame in the middle of it. It was like two cake pans on top of each other, glowing white. And you can in post put some pictures of these lookout towers that are essentially look like this. Mike Rogers said it was more or less white, sign of a sort of a golden light, and that was just panels because it had framework. The bottom of it was reflective. It looked like metal underneath it, all made of metal and covered in shiny, clean glass. It was glowing. It was actual lighting up the ground around there, but softly, which you can, I think when you see the pictures, you will kind of see how that could potentially have been the substitute for the UFO. Another interesting thing is that these things, as you mentioned, RJ, have a spotlight on them, and come to find out, they use different colored orbs or bulbs in these spotlights to essentially signal the other towers about the status of, if we've seen a fire or not. So the blue light that could have hit Travis could have been from the spotlight from this tower. And there's a picture here, and this site I'll send you that you can kind of show that this thing, if obscured by trees, it's high off the ground, but trees also are tall. So, kind of hiding behind some trees, you're on the road, which they believe where the actual incident occurred was called Rim Road. And it's about 15 minutes to Gentry Tower from their work site. along this rim road. So it's not just like a hop, skip, and a jump from the work site. And all the workers have, as I said, said that they were in the truck a while, not like 2 minutes, and this happened. So the thought, I think, is that it would have been very easy, especially with Mike Rogers being at the controls, kind of drumming up the panic as Travis jumps out of this truck and starts running towards this.
Yeah. Let's pause right there. Pause right there. So let's just pretend you and I are in a car.
Right.
And maybe you kind of know that I'm going to jump out and cause a ruckus.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all you know. That's all you know. And maybe there's 4 or 5 other guys in the car. Oh my God, what's RG doing? Oh my God. And then the blue light shines on me. And when it hits me, I purposely jump back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you take off.
Right.
And those guys are like, oh my God, they have no idea. They have no amount of time to really process what just happened.
Right.
The scene is gone. All they have is the shock and the remembering. And like, we're all familiar. This is a real thing when we talk about mass panic and like imagination. You can convince an entire room that they're going to die of a plague, which starts off with a rash. If you put them in a scenario where they believe they've been infected, they will develop a rash. Like, this is real psychological stuff that can happen. And so now just imagine that it's not even that bad. It's just Mike Rogers drumming it all up. And he gets everybody fired up and he rides off and he's like, all right, I don't want to know anything more. I don't want to be implicated. I don't want to know no more than what I got to know. You told me you were going to do something. You did your thing. And now I just know that I don't know where you went. And that's why he's able to pass a lie detector test.
Yeah, right? I do believe that they saw something. Now, what they saw, it could have been the tower. There were at this time inflatable UFOs that one can purchase. And this is a true story. I remember this very well. This must have been late 70s because I was young, and was with my dad, and we were going to his parents' house, my grandparents' house at the time. And there was I thought it was a UFO. And we're both like, that's a UFO, that's a UFO. And as we got closer to it, and we realized that it was a hot air blimp, essentially, in the shape of a UFO. And it was advertising for some, I think it was pizza or something. I don't remember. But both my dad and I were convinced for the longest time while watching this thing travel, while we're in the car, that this thing was a UFO. And it only, we got out of the car and it came over us. And that's when we realized that it wasn't what it was. So, I think it's very easy to mistake this, especially if you have this narrative being fed to you as well, that this is, oh my God, did you see that UFO? Oh my, I don't know. They're all panicked. They're freak out. They just lost, a member of their crew. He's out in the wilderness. They go back to where they think he was. And that's the thing. Nobody exactly on the way back knew where they really left him. That gives, I think, Travis plenty of time to either go up into the tower, which is 4.5 miles from the work site. The fire crews spend 5 days in these towers. Travis, having been, from that area, probably would have been easily able to figure out when those towers were manned and when they were not. Obviously, you would have needed somebody in on the hoax to light up the tower and shine the beam at him. So I think that it is more than plausible that it wasn't a UFO that took Travis Walton.
When you put all of these pieces together, growing up as a kid, I used to get the Scholastic newsletter, and it would have all the cool new books that was going to come out, right? And I would order my books. And I remember I ordered this 2-part book called Stranger Than Fiction, Part 1 and 2. And it would start off with a synopsis, just something incredible. The Travis Walton story. Then it would take you through what actually happened and what was occurring. And you were like, oh my God. You see how easy it is to just jump to the fantastical. But then the second you know some additional facts about the case, maybe it's not so fantastic. So picture this: Mike Rogers and Travis hanging out at the tree stump, chainsaw sitting there. Oh, yeah, did you see that cool special about Betty Barney Hill? It would be really cool to do this one thing, where we, stage something. Mike Rogers, I don't want to know nothing about it. Well, listen, man, like if we do this, we just need you to be quiet and like just play along, and that's all you got to know. And listen, you get, it'll help you out with this logging contract. Well, I don't want to know nothing. Just you do your thing. Okay, cool. Travis Walton, maybe he goes home and he talks to his brother Daryl, and they work out some plan, and they call some guy maybe that's never even been interviewed before, who sits up on this tower, this fire tower. He's like, puts the blue bulb in because blue seems like a cool light to shine on somebody, extraterrestrial rays and all. And then they're driving along. Bam! When the second there's a clearing where the beam of this blue bulb can be shined directly down into a path, or maybe a little hollow or somewhere, it happens, and then here comes Travis, like, oh, let me just hop out right here. This is going to be my cue. Boom. Jumps back. Mike Rogers freaks the heck out. Oh my God, you see that? Oh my God. Then he drives off, then they come back. And of course, Travis isn't there because Travis is now starting his 4.5-mile trek to this watchtower, where then he's going to what? Maybe he's going to hide out there for a few 3-4 days until he gets hungry. Maybe he stocked it up with peanut M&Ms and beef jerky. I don't know.
Well, I mean, these towers are essentially, apartments in the sky. So these people go up there for 5 days. The forestry workers go up there for 5 days at a time. So I would think that there probably were some supplies there that he would have had access to. I don't think he hiked the 4.5 miles from. I think that the tower where the actual UFO incident took place was 4.5 miles away from the work site. I think what happened is that Mike misdirected everybody away from the tower back up towards the work site and claimed that's where the encounter took place, even though everybody that's been interviewed said that it was a 15-minute journey before they hit the UFO. It doesn't, which in my mind, if I'm a police officer, it wouldn't have made sense to me, but I don't know. They're probably more trying to focus on trying to figure out where Travis is at that time and not really, I don't know, concerned with thinking that he'd be hiding in that tower. I don't know.
Well, so you also have to think about psychological and physical forensics that existed at the time. I think, Darin, you had mentioned earlier that these things weren't well regulated or locked up or anything. They were just kind of there, right? Like we lived in a more trusting world back then, and not everything was Big Brother observed. State police and regular police officers in the 1970s are not as well equipped educationally to deal with professional misdirection that has been planned out in this way. Number one, I think it's a small town. It still is kind of like a small rural area. It's the 70s. They're really pushing these guys like they thought they got murdered, right? And to your point that maybe Mike Rogers is guilty of misdirecting the search effort.
Yeah. Also, this was a sensational case. So as soon as it came out that there was a UFO, this was kind of the still UFOs were kind of a sensational subject then. And that this guy was supposedly abducted by one. it brought news from all parts of the world. The news media basically descended upon this small little town. This poor sheriff, I think his daughter was interviewed on he's passed, but I think his daughter was interviewed on the Discovery Plus. And I recall her saying essentially that their phone was ringing off the hook, like news media wanting to talk or interview that sheriff. So he's on top of, having to do this search. He's probably sleep deprived because he can't get, and as you state, I think times were different then. I think that, they did pressure the crew individually to try to break them down, to get them to admit that they had done something to Travis. But also, they all, except for the one, passed the lie detector test, and the other guys was inconclusive. It wasn't a failure regarding something happening. But I think that the questions that they were asked weren't very pointed. Essentially, they asked pretty much a couple questions, meaning, did you see a UFO? They didn't ask if they saw Travis get abducted. They didn't ask very pointed questions. It was very much, did you see something happen? And, did Travis get out of the truck? Did you see something happen? Did you see a UFO? Very hit or miss. Travis's first lie detector test, actually, after being returned, was he failed it. Some reporters from the National Enquirer had hired a polygraph expert to give polygraph statement to Travis. This is on November 15th, 1975. And he was given the polygraph and failed it. Now, subsequently, he was given another polygraph and passed, but it was claimed that he failed it because he wasn't in a good state of mind to have taken the test so soon after this encounter occurred.
I think, what's the Sherlock Holmes thing, right? Like if you've gone through every possibility,
Yeah.
no matter how crazy the last thing that's sitting there is, it must be the truth.
Yeah, how improbable it is, it must be the truth.
And let me just say that I have nothing but respect for those loggers. I have nothing but respect for the men and women in law enforcement and the investigative journalists and the TV crews who have put all this out there. I just, knowing about these fire towers, knowing about the bulbs, if there was a way to check like a log sheet of who was supposed to be at the tower on that night, and you could get a hold of that person if they were still alive. Chasing down these kinds of leads today is almost impossible because, these guys are old now. Who knows?
And I'm sorry, the quote is, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth.
Exactly. And let me be perfectly clear. The story that you paint, Darin, seems to me more probable than the story that Walton has told. And not that I'm disagreeing with the idea of the Walton's account of things. It's just that it goes back to what we brought up earlier as well, which has been your issue with this story from the beginning, which is the atypical nature of the account itself. Darin and I first talked about this. You guys listening or watching, you guys need to know I was a believer in the Walton account up until Darin shared with me some of what's been discussed in these Mike Rogers interviews and the facts that he's talked about this evening. These are things that are not so far-fetched to say could have happened. I
And
mean, I think we could stage this today.
it's interesting. The producer that Mike was recorded by talking about this was a producer who essentially had was working on a film with Mike and supposedly Travis, in which Travis was going to announce that it was a hoax and how he staged it, according to this producer. So take it for the hearsay it is. There's no way to prove or disprove it other than the word of the producer. You do have the recording of Mike, but yeah, I agree with you. I think the most damning nail in the coffin is that it's not even really an original story that Travis came up with. Now there is an
Pause, stop. I have got to interrupt you and tell the audience what you're about to hear. If you've never really dug in because you're just like media soundbite person like me and you read the cool stuff in the books and the magazines, great. But if nothing else, listen to what Darin's about to tell you. This is crazy.
So there was a short story by Robert Heinlein called Half Space Suit Will Travel. It was written in 1958. And it actually, I guess it is a novel. It won the Sequoia Children's Book Award for 1961. I'll just read the scene. Essentially, it is about the adventures of a 18-year-old country boy, Kip, who's out walking in a field at night. He encounters a flying saucer. He gets zapped with a blue light, and he wakes up aboard a craft.
And that is essentially Walton's whole story.
Yeah, and the website does a very good job of kind of breaking down numerous similarities between this story Robert Heinlein wrote and Walton's experience. So is it coincidence? Potentially.
I'll tell you what, you can't just take a story that you think nobody knows and make it true, right? Like if I wake up tomorrow and tell you this fantastic story about my magic purple crayon, y'all are going to think I'm nuts because we all know the story. And this is a well-known story that won an award, a few years later, albeit, right? Or is it, you said 61?
Was 16. The story came out in 1958. It won the Children's Book Award in 1961.
So here you go. Like 14 years later, 15 years later, somebody's going to basically take bits and pieces and reenact this thing and call it a news story. I don't know, Darin. I got to say that, again, I came into this believing. I can't believe it anymore.
It's hard to believe it I think it was once Mike Rogers honestly brought up in his own voice, stating that it was a hoax. It's very difficult for one of the key witnesses in this to walk that back.
I think the hardest,
how he tries to do it. I think the cat is essentially out of the bag. Travis Walton has always been, to me, like I said, the case never really, in my mind, there were a lot of red flags to begin with, just because it was so different than the typical abduction tale. So maybe I'm more prone. I'll be quite honest. Maybe I'm more prone to believe that it would be something that he would be capable of, because I never really, even though I wanted to believe and I believed that the men that passed the lie detector test did see something which they thought was a UFO. Whether or not it was, I think, is entirely up for debate. As Mike Rogers himself says, he only saw this object. He cannot account for any of the story after Travis was quote unquote abducted.
I think there's a few things that really we need to focus on. Number one, the reason, so I could give two shits whether or not Mike Rogers said they fucking, just made this whole thing like a hoax. What tells me that this is a possible hoax, Darin, is the way you shine a light on this idea that, like, I didn't even know about these fire towers. I didn't even know those things existed until just 10 minutes before this interview, before this episode taping. I had saw some of the screenshots and some of the videos that I was reviewing before this episode, to get some more facts about the case. And in one of the thumbnails, right, it's a forest and there's some sort of tower. And I'm like, oh, that's neat. I don't know what that looks like or what that is, but it's clear what that is. It's one of these fire towers. So what's important to me is the how. Like, you could tell me you were abducted and I'm like, oh yeah, but how? How could you have faked it? If I don't have a viable way to recreate a hypothetical how you would fake this, I'm not saying I'm the smartest person in the world, but like, if you can pass that cognitive test of mine first, chances are, like, I'm going to believe you. But I'm also going to believe you because I tend to believe people and put some faith in people that they're not going to be pulling my chain. So that's number one. But like, the whole idea that you can change bulbs, you can do these things, the drive to the site, it's farther than what they say it's going to be. It just lends to the fact, like, this would be really, really easy to do.
Yeah, and one of the other things that's a major red flag for me, to be quite honest, is if I'm an alien race and I'm coming here and I'm interested in how human beings work, why am I going to take just the one guy when I've got a truck full of men that I can experiment on right there?
Right. And is Travis Walton approaching and staring up at the fire in the sky? Is he a threat to you? I mean, we're talking about a race of beings that control technology that's able to turn on or turn off our most destructive forces in the world.
I mean, we're talking about creatures that can phase through solid material. Abduction witnesses claim that they come into their rooms through the walls and then that they're taken out of their rooms through these solid walls, that they're somehow materially destabilized, so they're able to be moved, essentially levitated through solid materials.
Exactly. And some of the other things that really just don't make sense to me, it's just in the details of the story. Like, once you break open this, how could I do it if I wanted to? It's kind of like I am not advocating for crime here, but just imagine it's the 50s and I figure out how, we're going to pull off the biggest bank caper in the world, right? Like, you kind of figure out, like, how can we do this? Oh, we could do this really easily. It'd be super simple to do because you're taking advantage. It's like you have some sort of foresight, which is to know exactly what's capable today, what you can reference, and also knowing the limitations of the way people think and what's possible for them to believe. You only have to be really ahead of the curve a little bit to manufacture a story and to do something so incredible, right? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? This never happened again.
Yeah.
Because now at this time we have the ability to go back and really look at it. And when we think about some of the science and stuff, which sounds incredible at the time, right? Gone for 5 days, no ketosis in the urine. That's crazy to me. You fought the aliens? What? Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, at some point, isn't there, like, he could take control of the ship, but is it unable to?
He found a chair with a bunch of controls and knobs on the arms of the chair, and he was flipping switches, et cetera, trying to do something.
Let me tell you who got fired. The alien in charge of Travis Walton. That's who fucking got fired that day. Like, if you and I are aliens, okay? Darin and RJ, aliens from Zeta Reticuli, and we come to Earth and we're like, oh, look, let's look at some indigenous species over this really cool logging area. Oh, hey, we should probably maybe not be in this area anyway because there's a logging crew here. There's like earthlings. By the way, maybe Greg, not the other alien, okayed this area. He was a little short sighted, didn't really care about it. He was like, oh, they're just peon earthlings, right? And then here comes Travis Walton comes out. He's like, oh, hey, oh my God, aliens. And I'm like, hey, zap him with the blue beam. Pull him up there. Pull him up, Darin. Let's put him in the green jelly for a little while and run some tests on this earthling. Really? And then I'm going to let the other 6 dudes just drive away. And then I'm going to what? I get tired of Travis and his shenanigans in my spaceship so long and we just like let him go. No, if these people, if these are aliens, right? Unless they're like peace, love, and harmony, which they're not, obviously, by the account that Travis gives, unless maybe their thinking is so far beyond ours that we just don't comprehend the way they think and the way they operate in the universe. But like, dude, if I'm on an alien spaceship and I abduct peon Travis Walton, I'm not gonna like return him alive. I'm just gonna like eject that dude into space and call it a day, right?
Um, I think what's interesting is that he claims he's gone for 5 days and he only has 2 hours worth of memories and he was hypnotically regressed and claimed these things occurred under hypnotic regression. Now, once again, though, if you have rehearsed a story enough to the point where you are believing it, isn't that going to be the story that'll probably come out under regression? I just don't think, it's very difficult for me. And Travis's, I guess, story that he's now kind of come to is that he believes that he was killed by the blue beam. The aliens felt bad. They picked him up, essentially brought him back to life and redeposited him. Not at the same point, mind you, just in the middle of the road somewhere. Which is also another red flag because in all other abductions situations,
I mean, Darin,
um,
that sounds cool as shit, right? Like a benevolent race of beings. Like, oh, hey, he's getting a little too close to the radiation zone.
yeah,
Oh, damn, Darin, you hit him a little too hard with the fancy blue beam. You're supposed to use the red beam. Phasers were not on stun. You done effed up, buddy. Let's get him on board. Let's bring him back to life in the old green jelly machine. And then what? Drop him back off after we let him run around our ship, almost take control. Oh, hey, well, he's freaking out about the appearance here. Yeah, bring out the human looking Nordic guys, right?
right.
I mean, nobody wants to be the guy, the skeptic. Nobody wants to back the skeptic guy. Nobody wants to back the person who says why this could not be possible. And I'm sure we're going to have people who comment on this video who agree with us or not. If you're going to be mad at somebody, you guys, be mad at Darin. Direct all your hate mail to him. I was a believer. I was a
Right.
believer in the Walton case,
I corrupted you.
but Darin
Correct.
corrupted me. One bad apple spoils the bunch. Don't tell me the truth. These are, and this really boils down to this idea of what we call an inconvenient truth. And that is that it's easier to believe in the other thing than it is to come away thinking about people you have believed so long and you've built like kind of a mental trust. I've never met Travis Walton. I don't know him anything, you guys, but here I am. I feel bad thinking about this story now with a perspective that I had never considered before, which seems more probable.
Well, I mean, the worst part about it in my mind is that let's face facts. The people that are speaking up as witnesses to this account have been compensated time and time again for them for backing it. Essentially, once again, it is surmised that what has caused Mike Rogers to kind of break camp is that Travis was also in talks for a remake of Fire in the Sky, and Mike was being cut out of the deal, and had essentially there were spoiled grapes about this, and essentially that's what caused Mike back his tail up. There's motivation there for Mike, to if I'm going down, you're coming with me, a kind of thing. I'm trying to look at it from both sides here. Is it possible things happen the way Travis said they did? Sure. But I think when you put the spotlight on it and you start to kind of peel away some of the layers of it, it just doesn't add up to me personally. That's just my own personal opinion.
But the people though
Take it or leave it.
the people who really want to believe though, Darin, I mean, this isn't going to change anybody's mind. There's always the thought that, if the government comes out and agrees to something or admits to something, or doesn't, there's always that, like, you're just not high enough in the organization to know, right? You and I have dealt with this all the time with the Masonic fraternity. Both Darin and I are Masons. We've not ever made it a point to tell anybody because it doesn't really have a bearing. But in this instance, right, like it kind of does, just in that, people are always like, oh, y'all are Satan worshipers. No, we're not. And then their retort is always, well, you're just not high enough in the organization to know. Like, y'all, we are definitely high enough to know anything that's going on. But in the same respect, it just doesn't feel like, it's like follow the money, right?
Mhm.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
This tale, like, it's been, one almost wonders, like, so I'm a cat's out of the bag here. Some people are out there like, oh, what are you, some crazy YouTube guy? No. Darin works for a prestigious thing, and I'm a data scientist. So let's just say we're two really intelligent people, not tooting our own horns, just saying you're not going to pull anything over our eyes. And when I think about this in a data point of view, I think, look at when documentaries and deals were signed with the people who have looked at who were a part of this whole thing. Look at the inflation rates of the US dollar and pull their bank records and see when they agreed to do these things. Because I'll bet money you'll see a massive, like, you'll see people were in hard times when they decided to come out and do another documentary. People were in hard times. Maybe Travis, this is terrible for me to say, and Travis Walton, if you ever catch this stupid show we do, no disrespect, and you can hate me forever for saying this, but just anybody. I need a new house. It's time for a new documentary, right? I mean, who's to say? We just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this is essentially a cash cow that has been being milked since 1975 at this point. It's going on 50 years, and more power to them. Like I said, I'm like the poster on the wall behind you. I want to believe, but just in this particular case, when you start looking at the differences between the standard abduction accounts and Travis's account, that's one red flag for me. But then when you start to add in a lot of the other things we've discussed, it pokes a lot of holes in I think the scenario. And following the evidence, I think the preponderance of evidence, when you take a step back and you look at it, and I'm not even saying with the skeptical, I'm just saying just look at it and use your best judgment, use your gut instinct, and I think that you would tend to believe that what occurred isn't quite matching to what the official story is.
Totally agree. And just like anything, you guys, like, we're putting this out there as a truly, we're attempting to be objective as possible, presenting both things. And what's coming out through this is natural conversation, organic conversation about, oh yeah, like for me, I've gone from pH neutral to this is acid. Like, I don't believe it at all. And this is because of the possibility, and all of the red flags that Darin has brought to this conversation. For a lot of us, all we know about this case is what's been presented to us, which is sensationalized media produced for television from a subjective point of view that usually points to either A, it happened, or B, just like how many licks to the center of a Tootsie Pop the world may never know, right? So here we are. We don't know. It's either I don't know or it happened, but nobody's producing the documentary that goes, this is really interesting, but guys, maybe it's not real. And let's be honest here, Darin and I are both believers, just not in this.
Right.
I think that's the case. Somebody had recently said to me, I got in this argument with my wife. I posted something on social media. I said, this will trigger everybody. Light orbs in a ghost investigation are just dust.
Yeah,
this is going to trigger some people, right? And so my wife's like, no, you're wrong. I think it's a thing. I think it's a spirit, blah, 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 blah. Here's why I think it's not, or I'm going to use this analogy rather, and that is that we have so many other things like EVP and these SB7 spirit boxes that change frequencies super fast, where you get intelligible responses. That evidence to me is hands down more incredible, more amazing, and just out of this friggin' world when it comes to that topic. The Travis Walton case is the dust particle of, although it's fantastic and amazing and we all know about it, it's still the dust particle, because even if it isn't true, you guys, you still have Barney Hill. You still have evidence of what the Navy has declassified. You still have there's a lot of debate about MJ-12 documents. You still have things like Ancient Aliens and Roswell and Admiral Byrd and like
the Ariel School, as well as
the Ariel School is that's like the one account that just baffles my mind. And like, if I had one shot to convince somebody that aliens were like legit, I'd be like, check this out. Watch this special. Watch this show about these kids who all saw the same thing.
And how they recount it still to this day. And the stories have remained, accurate to the day when they were telling them. So.
And the teachers, the schoolmasters who were there still say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, they were there to see the kids come in, and they knew that something was. The only adult that was on the playground at the time there was like a little shack, I believe, where there were some snacks and beverages being sold to the children while they were out on this play area. I don't think that as I recall, I don't think that any adults witnessed it, but all of the children that did witness it, I mean, even to this day, and they're all grown at this point, stick to their story. And I just, their accounts are just so similar. The way that the aliens move also have been, that's also documented in other abduction accounts, where they seem to float along the ground, not really walk per se, but kind of levitate, and that they can cover great distance in a blink of an eye, which is very kind of fascinating to me. We don't have any of that in this particular case. I mean, like I said, I think that if there's a UFO that close to a truck, it's going to disable it based upon what we know about these objects, and I think that if they're interested in abducting individuals for specimens for study, they're going to take all 7 of them, not just one. But that's just my opinion of the situation.
Well, who can best work and best agree? I'm totally with you on this. I will ask anybody who watches this, if you made it through the entire episode and you were finding yourself screaming at the screen, put your comments in the show notes, put your comments below. Let us know when we share it to Facebook, all of those things. Let us know what you thought about the episode. If you think we're way off base, if you think you agree, if you didn't know about some of these things, let us know. Again, all of the things that have been produced for this are really subjective and either in favor of or kind of ground neutral, whether or not these things happened. What we've produced here is we've talked about the entire gamut. And we've also talked about what is not very popular, the possibilities and how this thing could have been hoaxed. And to be honest, for me, I feel that this was something that blew up way out of proportion, that was hoaxed, that has put an undue burden on the consciousness of all of these people involved. And they have no choice but to save face and stick to their story and take it to their graves. But that's just my thinking. I don't know if Darin's with me. I think he's with me on, he convinced me unwittingly that I'm on the skeptic camp as well now.
I mean, once again, I want to believe, but in this particular case, I think the preponderance of the evidence points to this not being
at least like 100% accurate, right?
Right. Yeah. I would say, I mean, I think I'm at the point where I'm very skeptical of the whole thing. I would say maybe if asked to give a percentage, maybe I would say I believe maybe there's a 10% chance that it happened according to what Travis said, maybe even lower. I mean, after some of the things we've discussed tonight. And, once again, no offense, Mr. Walton, if you ever watch this, but it just doesn't add up for me personally. And as you said, we're both believers. So it's very, I think, for us to turn kind of to this skeptical view. But once again, it just doesn't add up to me.
I just feel icky whenever I'm on the skeptical side because I want to believe so bad. But yeah, totally with you. I want to ask again one more time, if you guys, do you believe the story? Do you not believe the story? Let us know. Shoot us an email. You can go to thefourthveil.com and you can fill out a contact form. Let us know if we missed something, if we're total idiots, if you hate our guts, whatever the case is, let us know. We will respond in the next episode for sure. Darin, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we've covered it all.
After this call, you guys, I'm going to pin Darin down on a next topic for the next episode. And I think we're going to come up with something really fun. So I hope you guys join us for episode, I think what will be episode number 8. It'll be episode number 8 in the second season of the show. As you guys all know, we took a little hiatus, little break because we had things going on, but we're trying to get back on schedule and release episodes more regularly, which is such as the case with most podcasters who have full-time jobs. So, Darin, any final
other podcasts? So
that's correct. Yeah, Darin's got a couple podcasts he does. I do the same. So, any closing thoughts, Darin?
No, just once again, I would ask you to, look at the evidence with an open mind and draw your own conclusions.
Wonderful. We'll put all of this in the show notes, as well as a couple of YouTube videos that kind of break down some of the interviews that had happened with both with Mr. Mike Rogers, as well as another video that deals with the Mike Rogers interview that's almost 4 hours long, but has some good earmarks in there. So you can just click and jump to sections of it that are very informative. And thanks to Darin for finding those. So until next time, everybody, we'll see you probably in a week or two on the next episode of Beyond the Fourth Veil. Take care, Darin.
Take care, RJ. Bye-bye.